what's the next play? How do we keep this going towards, the future? And you can't mire in that negativity. I think that's one of the things that the staff is so engrossed in it, right? They're in that every single day. And if you come into that, this oven situation, you just got to be like, okay, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it. You got to like steer it away from that moment and get it back on track as quickly as possible.
Welcome to Limitless Minds, the podcast where curiosity meets greatness. If you're ready to discover what it takes to be truly limitless and push beyond your own limits, you're in the right place.
Welcome back to the Limitless Minds podcast. Harry Wilson here, co-hosting with Joshua Lifrak. How you doing today, man? What's going on? What's happening? I heard you were wrangling tortoises in the Galapagos. Is this true? Did I hear this right?
It wasn't difficult to wrangle tortoises. They don't move quick. Neither do I these days, but they're really slow. But these, there's some tortoises. Is that the plural of tortoise? Tortoises? Tortoise?
Tortoise. No, I think it's tortoises. I absolutely think it's tortoises.
But some 120-year-old tortoises, 190, 80, 80-year-old tortoises out there, and which I thought was fascinating. But we went to the Galapagos Islands with the family for spring break. Pretty fantastic trip. It's kind of like going on safari in Africa. Like one of those things is one of those once in a lifetime type trips. Even though some do it multiple times, it's like one of those types of trips. What was
the most amazing thing you saw down there?
I mean, we swam with sharks, which that's not necessarily the most amazing, but that was like the first time I've swum with sharks.
Did you have a cage or were you just out there?
No, we were just out there in open water, dude. Open water.
Did you? I don't know if I could do that. Did you the first time you saw?
These weren't, not really, because we had a guide that was with us, and these were smaller sharks. When I say small, 4 to 6 feet max.
Right.
White tip, I think, is maybe the type of shark. But and they were at the bottom of the water, and we were at the top of it, and so you recognized pretty quickly they didn't want anything to do with us. But I think that the surprising animal or wildlife that I enjoyed spending time with were these hummingbirds. I'm not really a bird guy. I'm not like a bird watcher or anything like that. But these hummingbirds, we went to this place that's like where hummingbirds were just out, and like we had these little Coke bottle caps with some sort of sweet water or whatever it was in these caps, and they would come and then you sit there with your open hand and hope that a hummingbird would land on your hand and then drink out of this Coke bottle top, and they did, and it was really cool. And so we had some cool video, like slow motion video of these hummingbirds, because they are moving so fast with so much velocity. When you catch them in the slow motion, you can kind of see what they're doing. So that was pretty neat. I think that was probably the most like interactive and surprising kind of thing. But sea lion, sharks, a lot of different types of birds. The blue-footed boobies and red-footed boobies and Nazca boobies are birds kind of native to that area, I think. So
that's pretty amazing.
A lot of iguanas. So it was all good.
Yeah, it's great. And it's amazing because you got to see these great animals and this great wildlife, and who we have on our show today might actually just cook up those wildlife as animals, which is nice. Which is, Travis and I always joke about a hard transition. That was pretty hard transition. So we're excited today, though, because I just wanted people to know that you went to the Galapagos and you were wrestling tortoises. That's it. It's swimming with sharks.
I don't want people to think I was wrestling these tortoises, because I don't want them to. These animals are very important to the native areas of Galapagos and Ecuador. We definitely observed. Didn't touch these.
I'm sure you weren't allowed to touch them, right?
No, I wasn't. We weren't interested in touching them, but they were pretty fascinating, pretty cool. My kids loved it. So.
Yeah, and speaking of fascinating, is our guest today on the Limitless Minds podcast, which I'm super excited about because I've known him for at least 15 years now, and he's one of the, I think maybe thoughtful is the word I'm going to use, but who we have on today is a chef from New York. And not only is he a chef, he's a CEO. He's the CEO of Delicious Hospitality Group. But before he became the CEO of Delicious Hospitality Group, which has 2 amazing restaurants in New York City, Charlie Bird and Pasquale Jones. Charlie Bird was, by the way, named the best restaurant in New York. And I believe it was 2017 by Eater magazine, Restaurant of the Year by Eater. So that's no joke, right? That's no joke situation. And prior to that, he was also at Pasquale Jones. They have, ready for this? I don't know if you've ever had this, but they have something called clam pizza. It was named one of the top 10 dishes of 2016 in New York City.
Love that.
Plant pizza. I've had it before. It's spectacular. It's really different and spectacular. I'm going to ask Ryan about the oven that they have actually in Pasquale Jones, because they had it imported from Tuscany. It's crazy. The whole story behind that. Ryan was named the Rising Star by the James Beard Foundation's the top chef by Esquire magazine, and 4-time finalist for best chef in the Southwest by the James Beard Foundation. So in other words, this guy's a baller, and we're going to bring him on, and we're going to get him in here right now.
Let him cook.
We're going to let him cook. There you go. That's good. See, you're on it, bro. You're on it. The hummingbird got you going, bro. So we're going to welcome Ryan Hardy into the podcast. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to chat with you, Ryan, and I want to just kind of get a little bit of a sense of your history in the kitchen, and then becoming the transition going from a chef to a CEO. But before we do that, I got to ask you a man of the world. And I'm going to throw this first question at you. I already have my answer in my mind, but maybe Harry could come up with one really quickly too. But just one of the more, I just want to hear about a memorable meal, or maybe one of the best meals you've ever had. Where was it? Give me the circumstance. What was going on? Why did it rank that highly? Those types of things. The people want to know.
There's so many. I think one of the great things about food is sharing it. Obviously, I think the atmosphere means everything. That it's that moment in time. That is something that I think meals have that ability to capture and create a memory that is larger than, say, the occurrences of that day. And I have so many in my life, but one of the ones that I definitely refer to time and time again, especially in stressful moments, was this little place literally on a rock in Puglia. It's right on the water. The water kind of laps up on these volcanic rocks, sharp volcanic rocks, and there are picnic tables. There's like plastic picnic tables, and the wine comes, you get white, red, or bubbles. Like that. There's no, those are your choices. And you eat sea urchin, and that's it. And you have sea urchin. You can have sea urchin with pasta. You can have sea urchin with wine. You can have, I think there's like something fried, and that's it. And it's just one of the most extraordinary meals. And, we walked across the street and got fresh figs that some guy, plucked off a tree. And that was just, in the summer sun, is one of the most memorable meals I've ever had.
That's pretty good. I think the simplicity, I think a lot of times too, I think, especially in today's day and age with the world that we're in, simplicity is lost a lot of the times, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And I'm sorry if there's a little...
No, it's New York. This is exactly what we're supposed to have. We're supposed to have the New York City background.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I think simplicity. I think, there's that great quote by Saint-Exupéry, which is, perfection is achieved not when there is nothing more to add, but when there is nothing left to take away. And I think I try and remember that in our day, with the food that we design, obviously, but also the guest experience. Like, how do we strip away those challenges for the guest? How do we remove those roadblocks to happiness? How do we reduce the stress for our staff and for our team? How do we kind of do that at the same time? How do we push, right? Gentle, constant pressure that allows us to kind of keep towards our standards, keep towards our goals, but does so in a fun way. And I think that is so true whether you're a diner on the side of a beach or whether you're trying to run a business.
Yeah, removing the barriers to happiness. I love that. Yeah. I think we talk about it a lot here at Limitless Minds. We talk about non-negativity, right? And so one of the things that we see all the time from the mental side of performance is that people will get caught into the drama, they'll get caught into the negativity. And sometimes we call it a negativity audit or a negativity diet. And when you do that, it's like there's a lot of power in the removal of negativity versus the addition of things, right? And so it's doing simple better, really, is what it boils down to. Yeah. But that being said, okay, now Harry, your time to go. Like we got Ryan sitting on volcanic rocks over the ocean in Puglia, Italy. And
I want to hear yours.
Urchin with bubbles or non-bubbles.
Well, I got two real quick, and it was funny you say Italy, so I'm going to take us to Italy as well. So I went with my in-laws to to Florence, Italy, a number of years ago, and we got a chance to go into a kitchen and have like a cooking class and learn how to make pasta, like authentic Italian pasta. And also, there was another dish that was like a chicken cacciatore that I still make to this day. So we learned how to cook. We cooked, and then we ate, right?
Yeah.
And it was, but it wasn't just the food. Obviously, we cooked the food, so it was a ceiling to how good it was going to be. But it was so incredible. But it was really the atmosphere and the experience of like being in Italy, cooking, like making pasta from scratch, and then having that chef take us through the whole experience was amazing. Great glasses of wine with it, etc. So that's one experience. And the other experience was with some of my best friends on my 10-year anniversary. We went to Cabo, and we went to Flora Farms. And that was my first time at Flora Farms down in Cabo.
I've heard it's amazing.
Farms. It really is amazing. So when I hear people going to Cabo, I'm always recommending Flora Farms. But
the food was fantastic.
The food was fantastic. But it was the atmosphere, and it was the friendship and the fellowship. At that particular place. And this was 2020. This was like mid-February 2020. So this is right before COVID hit.
Perfect.
And we remember that time just because it was like the last time before COVID.
The last moment.
So I mean, I think you're right. I mean, I think it's like the people, the experiences, who you share it with, so those are the first two that pop in my mind. You know what I mean? Of so many meals.
It's always.
I love that.
Isn't it so incredible too? And I've asked this question to a number of people, and it's always about the experience, right? And I think one of the things that I wanted to ask you, mine was a place in Amsterdam called De Kaas. It was a Michelin star restaurant there, and my wife and my two kids, we rolled up. We've been traveling around Europe. We had no reservation. We walked in, and we looked sad and happy and pleased, and they got us in, and it was typical Dutch. It was a repurposed greenhouse, and so they grow. They only serve food that they grown themselves or slaughtered themselves. So it was a tasting menu, and it was just this wonderful experience. But here's the thing, and I think you've kind of mentioned this. Like, I think we forget the flavors, right? There's one dish I do remember recently, and it was this leek dish that I had at a place called Pasquale Jones. It was spectacular. that I've tried to recreate in my own kitchen, and I cannot do it. But
we'll put the recipe in the chat. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah. Who did you say the celebrity was that absolutely loves that leek dish?
Justin Timberlake. Yeah. JT. Awesome. He would crush it. They would order like 3 of them, and then they'd be like, I got to order a 4th one. It's that good.
So anyway, but it's about the experience, and it's about, I think, what we talk about a vibe, having a vibe to a place. And so for you, I'm going to go, one of the things we talk about all the time is success leaves clues. So Charlie Bird is named the restaurant of the year by Eater. And if you've ever eaten at Charlie Bird, I'll take you there one of these days, Harry. But there is a vibe. So can you tell us a little bit about what you guys do behind the scenes to help create an energy, a vibe, a place where people can feel comfortable and happy and welcome and have that hospitality?
Well, we founded that restaurant, my former partner Robert and I, in 2013. And at the time, I'm not from New York. I grew up in the Midwest. I grew up in Kentucky and lived all over the West Coast and a bunch of different places. And I always had this love affair with New York City. I always escaped to New York, and I loved the sidewalks, the kind of the crumbling walls and the graffiti, and I loved it, the grit of it all. And what I found at the time was that in 2010, when I was really making a move, was that people were really designing. I think of restaurants as books, and they were really writing books about far off places, and they were not. There was no real love and respect for what was right in front of them in New York City, in this island that was, in the water. And so as somebody, it almost took an outsider to really, truly have a good view and appreciation for what was right there in front of us at that time. And so we put together a restaurant that we really felt celebrated downtown New York, celebrated the music, celebrated the feel, and took all of the ingredients and all of the persona and all of the benefits of fine dining in a white tablecloth restaurant and brought it downtown to a place that, we could listen to hip hop and we could wear a jean shirt and Adidas and cook. I cooked in a t-shirt and one of those silly little paper hats that you wear in diners for the first couple of years, because it was meant to be disarming. It was meant to not be serious. It was meant to be a place where you kind of let your hair down. And And we really did remove as many of the decisions as we could by curating the alcohols that we had. So we didn't need to have 13 different tequilas or vodkas or scotches. We created it down to one great one or two great ones. And that idea of you coming in and just not having to make all these decisions along the way. You already made all these decisions to get out to dinner. Let us just help you was really one of the fun things and was the real ethos to the restaurant. And so I think the vibe came out of that, that ability to just be cool, man. Just just relax. And the first night we played music. I'm a kid that grew up listening to hip hop and much, you know, many other things, in Kentucky, and it was very taboo to listen to hip hop where I grew up, and yet this was the music of New York, and I was so blown away that this is what this is was created here. This is so amazing, and it just resonated with me in so many ways. A kid from the '70s listening to that in the '80s and '90s was just so like a monumental shift to me. And so that first night when we played this music, I walked up in the dining room, and you just don't know what to expect when you open a restaurant in New York City and it's your first night. Oh my God, you're terrified. And I walked up in the dining room, and man, like heads are bopping, and they're eating chicken liver, and they're like, "Oh man, this is great!" Everybody's happy, and so that's the
cool.
vibe we really stuck with.
I love it, man. By the way, so I live in Louisville, Kentucky.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I'm not from here. My wife is from here. So people ask all
Yeah,
the time, how'd you end up in Louisville? And it's a quick
yeah,
answer. My wife's from here. My in-laws live here. So we
that's
need we
great.
need help with these kids. But where in Kentucky are you from?
Lexington.
Okay. Okay. Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Go Cats. Go
yeah. That's
Cats.
right. Louisville's a great city.
One of the things I'm curious about too is, you've made a career that's, moved from, the intensity of the kitchen, the complexity of leading to the complexity of leading an entire hospitality group. Right. And so you've gone from, in many ways, like chef to CEO. Right. And what is the through line? What is that experience like? Because as a founder of a company, an early
Hmm.
stage company it's like kind of in growth, kind of rapid growth right now. It's a scary place, and
Yeah.
leadership can be lonely.
Oof.
Even though you're surrounded by a team and people that you know and love and all these different things.
Yeah.
What was that? What was? Tell me a little bit about that experience, in regards to that evolution from chef to somebody that's running essentially running a company.
Well, first of all, nobody does it alone. There's no
Mhm.
there's no great coach out there. I think there's really good coaches that have great teams and great people around them that help them rise up and give them the ability to enlighten others. Right. I believe that, and just incredible people along the way that helped me kind of climb that ladder rung by rung and learn the skills along the way. Number one, supporters along the way, whether they were just great diners or investors along the way, were sort of key to that. So I think building those relationships was kind of like the bedrock of it. I think finding an incredible partner. I mean, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention my wife, Agatha, who's just an incredible spirit individual, but also somebody who she runs a PR and marketing firm. That's a national firm, and it's a boutique firm, but she's really keyed in on hospitality and luxury travel, and so understands some of the diners. And she's been somebody who's really helped guide me along the way as I've needed someone to speak to, particularly as partners kind of come and go throughout your life, or projects come and
Mhm.
go, and you have to go back to that center point. Having somebody who you can make those tough decisions with is, as you say, can be very lonely if you're a leader or a sole CEO.
Yeah.
So having somebody like that is kind of a bedrock. Shout out to you, Agatha. And then I think along the way is the team. Like I mentioned in the beginning, I think I've been fortunate enough to have so many great chefs kind of start with us and grow up and take on larger and larger roles with the company, that it allowed me to then take more and more on in terms of what's our next project look like? How do we design that next project? What do we want to make an impact on? And years ago, just to use an example, we started off with Charlie Bird. We grew it to Pasquale Jones. Before we had finished building Pasquale Jones, we signed a lease on the third restaurant, a restaurant that was to become Legacy Records in an old recording studio in New York. And as we were building that, we got this opportunity to work with JetBlue Airlines and redesign all of their mint class. And it was a project that at first it wasn't really in our wheelhouse. We declined the invitation as much as we were fascinated by the airline and the brand. And they came back to us and said, no. The reason you declined is exactly why we want to speak with you. Is we really want to bring that quality and that type of thing to the restaurant. Would you ever, or to the airline? Would you ever consider doing that? And so I wouldn't have been able to do those layers if it hadn't been for the great people that were taking over those roles. And I believe that we have to build the role, give people the metrics, the data for it, those SOPs and the recipes and those kind of things, and then let them live in that. Let them grow that role into what they want it to become as well, and guide and mentor them along the way. And so I think that's the through line is kind of get out of the way in a sense of these moments, whether it's like I said, the diner coming in and having dinner with us, or a chef taking over a new position and say, look, here are the kind of the parameters to work within. Let's have some fun together and let them live a little bit.
Yeah, that's awesome. So let's go backwards a little bit in terms of like a kitchen, right? Because I think most people listen to this haven't. Maybe they have, maybe they haven't. But most people haven't been in the back of the house, at a restaurant. They don't see the intensity. The every game is a Super Bowl. Every day is a Super Bowl kind of deal, right?
Yeah.
Like they don't get that. They don't understand that, I think, a lot of the time. So can you just explain kind of how the back of the house works, and then like more so than that, what a really good back of the house works like? Like what does that look like, and what's a great team in the restaurant world?
That's a great question, Josh. Listen, both of you certainly have backgrounds in sports and understand what a sports team, operates like. And there's going to be real tough moments on that field or in that kitchen. And there's going to be, hopefully a lot of elation, at moments too. And it's the grind. It's the day-to-day grind that makes up a kitchen, and certainly the day-to-day grind that creates success. And, I had this conversation last night with some great guests that came in, and they were asking about, some of the recent news reports about abuse in the kitchens and anger issues and the things that have kind of come out over the years. And I think, I listened to them, I talked to them, they said, well, you don't run kitchens like that. Like, look, you're a really nice, even keeled person. And I said, 100%, and have I lost my temper in kitchens? Yeah, of course. But the reality is, number one, that is not going to fix anything. And number two, I think people who have immediate reactions to some of those moments that are outside kitchens or outside of sports teams don't entirely understand the pressure that exists within those organizations. And so, my job as a leader is to remove that pressure, is to kind of streamline that pressure through, thoughtful preparation. I think that's a real key moment. The basic of setting up a kitchen is, I'm sure everybody listening can understand, is we have a series of hierarchy in the kitchen, and whether we kind of start with the dishwashers or the polishers, and then kind of build your way up to the cooks and the back waiters and the servers and the sous chefs and the managers and et cetera, all the way up, and everybody has to do their role. And if any one person doesn't do their role, then the whole house can't stand up, and the team can't function. And you use a football term that the offense can't go on the field. And so it's just it's a real easy concept, but it's actually quite difficult to execute. And I think when we set up these professional kitchens, it's about understanding your place in that moment, and understanding the ability to succeed, and then having the confidence to do so. And I think that's what's allowed us to exist for so long in New York City is that confidence in execution. And we don't get it right. There's a lot of days where we don't get it right.
Yeah. Josh, what he's describing, if you had like taken this out of context and didn't tell people this, we're talking about, the professional kitchen, you could easily, tell somebody that we were talking about an NFL football team or a Major League Baseball team or a college basketball team that's successful, right? Or that's not successful. And everybody having to do their part. In basketball, there's a 6th, 7th man off the bench, right? And there's somebody that there's a big man, there's a point guard. Like, everybody has to be able to do their role. Football, I think, is one of those ultimate team sports where the quarterback gets a lot of the attention and the love, right?
Yeah.
I'm mentioned to be like a chef, like a head chef in a restaurant, but it can't be done without the sous chef, can't be done without, people at the front of the building, kind of,
Right.
creating an experience for a customer, for a diner, whatever it
Yeah.
might be, and everywhere in between. And then there's people in the front office, GMs and talent scouts that, nothing can really happen without the talent itself. So it's like,
Yeah.
there's so many different, spokes to the wheel that make a great restaurant or that make a great NFL team or whatever it might be. And
Yeah.
yeah.
What do you think, Ryan, for you? Like what have you done to help, your team be in that moment, be more focused on just, hey, this is my job and I'm going to handle it. But also in the same vein, like one of the things I loved about working in the restaurant world was it was a team, and you felt like in the good ones that I worked in, you felt like you were part of a team, and you felt like there was connection and that you could, hey, you know what, somebody's going to help me out on this if I mess it up, right? So how do you help, like as a leader or as the chef, how do you help create that? What do you do?
There are a couple of things. I think number one is have fun. I think laugh a lot. People ask me all the time, how do you deal with the stress? And I say, I laugh. And I do. I have this kind of nervous laugh that I do. And when you get extraordinarily difficult news in the middle of service or a customer is unhappy or whatever, you're just like, man, I got to make a light of this and de-escalate a situation in that moment, or just keep it light and fresh, for people. They do work on their feet a lot in kitchens, and we work with sharp objects and in hot places and with a very, very thin line of success in terms of delivering all that food at the same time to one table. And so, keeping it fresh and kind of, being there, in the team is number one. Number two is I'm there beside them. And I think that's a really, really, really important part is I love to cook. And so I go from restaurant to restaurant and I'm on the line and I'm picking up the pizza peel and I'm firing pizzas in the oven and I'm expediting. And recently I've been the sommelier in the restaurants. I've been managing, covering shifts. I'm there doing repairs and maintenance and replacing electrical outlets and, light bulbs and, those kind of things. So that again, it's about not just being a part of the team. It's about leading that team. It's about showing, Josh, one of the terms that you gave me years ago, which I really loved, is that respect 90 and that ability for everybody to see, and look, the coach is running to first base as hard as he can, every single day. And so I try and be there before them, just as long as them, with them, et cetera. And so I think those two things really help to keep people motivated, to keep them in a successful state of mind. And again, kind of freeze barriers. If I see stuff that is a problem, I'll give you another small example. The other day was my wife's birthday. And
Happy birthday, Agatha.
Yeah, I had to leave my wife's birthday party to go fix a overflowing drain problem at Charlie Bird. And I had to, grab the pumps, fix things up, get in the hands and knees, get down there on the ground and do it while the kitchen is like trying to prep and get ready for service so we can fix this and move into service. And that's the kind of thing, sure, a restaurant owner does that, a business owner does that, but you do it so that the team knows they can count on you and they know that you are one of them and you're not afraid to take that when you need to.
Yeah, I love that, man. I love that. And I think that, because one of the questions I have for a lot of leaders, because I'm trying to implement this in my everyday and trying to figure out, still trying to solve this puzzle kind of constantly. It might be just kind of this constant quest for knowledge that I'm looking for is this big word that everybody uses called trust. Right? And I think we all would agree how important trust is when you're looking to kind of build a team and help people actualize the potential, help the business actualize its potential. What's your take on that as far as how do you build it? Because we know how easy it is for it to like erode. And it seems like it's much harder to build and curate and nurture. Like, how have you approached, trying to build trust with your team from top to bottom? I bring that up now because, to me, it seems like things like actions and behaviors like that you just described are probably one of those ways that you've done this. But tell me a little bit about that.
Look, that's really important. Trust is incredibly important, whether you're dealing with your customers and they trust that they're going to come in and have a great meal, dealing with your staff and that they trust in you in the direction that you're headed in, or or with your purveyors. And look, you're going to take some punches along the way. I definitely have taken some myself for businesses that have opened, closed, et cetera, along the way. And we were dealt a hand that COVID was not something that any of us could have seen coming, right? It changed a lot of our lives. It certainly changed a lot in the food and beverage industry. And so you do the best that you can. And I think trust is when you have a bad day or somebody writes something bad about you, you show up the next day and you deal with it, head on. Or if you make a mistake at work, you show up the next day and you address it with the team. And communication solves so much. And being able to talk about that and say, hey, here's what we're doing next. Here's where we're headed with this brand. Here's where I see you in this team, right? I think that is something that I've worked on over the years. That transparency is key for anybody to buy in. They want to know what the next play is, and I think that's a real important aspect.
One thing that I've experienced, right, as a leader is certainly that word transparency that you just mentioned, like come up a lot with my team, right? And we have, Josh knows, we have a small, pretty lean organization, a bunch of people that like work together, work for each other, like just kind of grind together. And it was great. I think we have a team that trusts everyone and so on and so forth. But I'm always kind of keeping a close eye on it because, as an early stage company, today's information changes tomorrow, figuratively, right? It changes so fast. So today's transparency is not necessarily tomorrow's truth or transparency, right? And so sometimes as a leader, you're trying to like pick and choose, like, what do I share with the team in this current environment? Because, gosh, this may shift in 90 days. This might shift in 60 days. And nobody likes change. So as soon as you give them transparency, it's like, hey, you want the truth? You can't handle the truth, right? Because it kind of feels like, hey, listen, as soon as I give you this information,
showing up?
Like,
what's going on here?
I'm going to end up giving you some other new information that's going to feel like change. And sometimes the change is tougher to handle than the transparency. You know what I mean? So how do you deal with that when like there's a lot of moving parts? There's a lot of, in this case, there's a lot of different concepts and things that you built and creating. How do you balance that transparency with the fact that that sometimes one of the things that people struggle with the most is change? That is inevitable.
It is inevitable, and it's uncomfortable, and you can't tell somebody in those moments that's how you hit growth, right? That they don't want to hear that. And so, look, I think being present is really important. What I can tell you is we opened a business further out in Long Island a couple of years ago, and it was an extraordinary business. I'm really proud of it. We ended up exiting this past year, did a great job launching it. It was kind of our time to move on. And what it did was it really took a lot of my focus away from the day-to-day at the restaurants. And I could feel the difference when I walked into the restaurants. And it wasn't that people didn't have a sense of leadership or whatnot, but it was like getting emails about things or getting on a once-a-week phone call wasn't good enough to stay present and be that leader that helps them with those uncomfortable moments of change, whether it's, hey, we're changing our hours of operation, or we're doing a new menu launch, or whatever those very, very small changes might be. They create a lot of complexity in the day to day, and I hate to keep bringing it back to sports, but the two things seem so aligned. Is we're rolling out new plays and we haven't practiced them yet. And when are we doing that? And does anybody have a good look on this? And those kind of things. It's just that's a real challenging thing for a team to handle, even though they're all professionals. They've done this, we've gone through it 50 times. You still have to do it. So I think, being present is critical. I think announcing things as far out as I can, hey, next Thursday, this is going to happen. And then, coming up on Tuesday, hey, just a reminder on Tuesday. And then I fumble on this sometimes, but then delivering it, being there and actually executing it and making sure that you've done what you said you were going to do, and you're holding them accountable to what they're going to do as well. Makes a big difference. And look, we all try. We're not 100%. Hall of Famers hit 325.
at best. Right.
Yeah.
At best. I think just to close the book on that trust component, I think that, if you were to sit down and have a discussion like we are with around trust, there's so many things you could put on this whiteboard, right? Yeah. And I think it comes down to, being reliable, right? Like you just said, doing what you say you're going to do, right? Being real or authentic, right? And, all of us, we're all built a little differently, but if I can just be authentically me, or you can be authentically Ryan consistently, time and time
Yeah.
again, I think people kind of you're a little bit more predictable, which I think people have more comfort around, right?
Yeah.
And then just that idea of that it's about humanity, it's about the people, it's about the people on your team, it's about customer first, as those that are building businesses, like the customer first. And I think some of those things, and there's all sorts of nuances within all of those three things, but I think reliability, authenticity, and kind of being human are critical to building that trust. And I think those are some of the things you described, and some of the things you're doing by being on the floor and fixing issues, and so I think that's fantastic. Yeah, thanks for that, man. That's helpful.
I think also making mistakes is part of humanity, and then owning those mistakes, learning from it, and saying, okay, we're not going to do that again. Like how do we do that, and how do we fix that, et cetera, are important. And I think that also helps the team understand, like, it's okay. I heard another great restaurateur give a speech, and they said something to the effect of, I want you to make mistakes, like that you're going to learn. Like that means you are in a position that you have to strive to achieve. And I think those are really important moments of growth for everybody.
Yeah, and I think one of the big things about mistakes too, and just kind of throw this in there, like I heard a great quote years ago that lessons are learned when actions change. So, okay, here I am. I've had the mistake, but the learning and the fixing of the mistake doesn't happen until the next time that opportunity comes up again, and I change my behavior, because I think that's such a huge thing. Speaking of challenges and things of that nature, so I want Harry to understand the actual oven that is in Pasquale Jones. Can you just explain where that came from? And then there's a reason for this, because I want to, because I know the story. So where did that oven come from, and how did it get into your restaurant?
All right. Well, look, I have two stomachs, Harry. That's something that you need to know. I have one for pizza and one for everything else. And I can go.
We are the same person. We are the same person.
All right, man. I can't wait to hang. We got good times ahead.
Yeah.
All right. So look, New York has great pizza, no doubt. And there's whatever your definition is, it's here. And I think that is a really cool thing. And in fact, it's all around the world. Pizza exists, and so that makes it incredibly difficult to operate within, because everybody has an opinion about it. But when we opened Charlie Bird, and it was a pretty big hit, we were working late nights, and my partner and I really wanted to just escape and go drink a great bottle of wine and eat a pizza. And at the time, the best pizza was in Brooklyn, and we really felt like the places in Manhattan, although there was great pizza, there was really not a place where you can get a great bottle of wine and you get a pizza. And we thought, this would be a great second restaurant. This is what we should do. We should do pizza. So I found a place on the corner in Little Italy on Mulberry Street, which is just one of the great streets in Lower Manhattan. It had a wood burning oven and exhaust there, which is very, very difficult to get in New York City. The oven was not worthy, but the exhaust was very valuable. So if you're gonna go this route and you really want to do wood burning pizza, which of course you have to do, then you got to go to Naples, and you got to go meet one of a couple of guys that make the best ovens in the world. And so we go to Stefano Ferrara, and we decide to buy not just one oven but two ovens. And I'll kind of skip some of the details of that, but suffice to say, you have to kind of go test these out literally in a parking lot. There's I don't know, 300 ovens in this parking lot, and you're kind of standing there mimicking, yep, this is the right size and whatnot. And they're definitely interviewing you. They want to know, do you know what you're talking about? Otherwise, we do not want our oven in your restaurant. And so we order these ovens, and they ship from Italy, and they come. And
to be clear,
yeah.
I want the audience to understand the gravity of this. A ginormous pizza oven is getting put on a ship. It's not getting on a FedEx plane. They're not.
No.
This is not Amazon.
No, this is coming via ship.
This is like whatever. It took like 2 months to get across the sea to get to New York City. So now,
I think it did.
Dock somewhere in Brooklyn. It gets offloaded. And sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. But I wanted people to understand. We're not just talking about like ordering that little pizza oven and grill thing that you can get on Amazon.
Yeah.
Right.
Specifically, those ovens weigh just shy of 7,000 pounds each. And so you're looking at, let's just round up, say 14,000 pounds. What was a ton? 2,000 pounds? Is that right? I always get confused with the kilos and
social sciences,
pounds.
brother.
Yeah,
Social sciences.
Anyway, so yes, they arrived in New Jersey in the port, and then when they arrived, I didn't even think about it. I had, somebody calls me and says, "Hey, your ovens are, we've offloaded them. They're sitting here on the dock. What are you doing with them?" I was like, I didn't even think about that. I got to call a freight company to pick these things up, and so that was a challenge. And anyway, the ovens show up in the back of an 18-wheeler, tractor, and they park outside this, restaurant construction site. And fortunately, the 18-wheeler has the wherewithal to have a forklift, and so it lifts one of these ovens off. We have to cut the wall, the window wall out. And because we're young and scrappy, you need permits in New York City to do that. You can't just do that. And we said, just do it real fast. Nobody will notice, kind of thing. So we saws all this wall apart and, set it aside. And we bring the oven in, and the forklift, as it's pulling up, kind of meanders to the edge, drops the oven in place, and the whole building shakes, as it settles. And we had, truthfully had a structural engineer come and take a look at the location for these ovens and the building itself. It's a very, very old building. It was owned by Lucky Luciano, a famous gangster, back in the 20s. It's a steel reinforced concrete building made from brick and the whole thing. So it's an old, pre-war building. And so we set it down on this old tile floor, and we put in a hand jack it up. Ball bearings fly everywhere. This thing just destroyed a hand jack.
Oh my gosh.
So we have to go get, heavyweight hand jack. We wheel it over. We set it in place. We kind of, negotiate the first oven, set it in place. Yep, that looks about right. We set it down. We pull the jack out, and it falls through the floor. Just crushes the concrete below it. Just punches a hole right into the basement. Fortunately, there was some steel there, which prevented it from falling through. And, we quickly call the structural engineer. We got to come back. We got to do more steel girder. So getting these types of ovens into play is much, much, much harder than we anticipated. And then, actually getting them fired up is a real challenge. But once you have that's the type of commitment that it takes to create great things.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that because that's like, I mean, Harry, could you feel your anxiety rising as he's telling that whole story about
immediately.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So how do you manage that? Right. Because I think one of the things that is really important for our listeners to understand is the kitchens are a place of stress. And this is an example of high stress where you're the owner and you have these 7,000 pound, I would have lost my stuff. I would have been done. I don't know how I would have handled it. So what's your mindset when you're dealing with things like that, where you're having minor emergencies on a daily basis? How do you manage that?
I always have kind of a plan B. I think that's, I look at a day and, this is a plan B. This red wall right here is my plan B today, right? I always have that contingency in the back of my head is, okay, here's the day. What are some things I haven't looked at today? What are some things that maybe need my attention today and that I just haven't thought about yet? And I try and make a little list of those just to check in so I can try and prevent some of those things before they happen. But no matter what, every single day, and I think it happens to all of us as a parent, it happens to you in running a business, whether it's big or small, something's going to come up. There's, breaking news that affects your Fortune 500 company. There's always some sort of a mini crisis that's going to happen. And so, number one, you can't be too glued to that schedule of events. You've got to be flexible. I'm quite OCD, and so that's difficult for me. But I think it's something that you got to let go on some of that stuff and say, okay, I've got to reprioritize my moments. Number two, I think you just have to assess the situation and put it in the grand scheme of things. If that oven would have toppled over and broken into 1,000 pieces, it would have really set us back. But you know what? You got to look at it and say, okay, nobody got hurt here. Let's look at the dollar value of this and let's move on to how does that affect our timeline? They're just things that happen, along the way. And so, what's the next play? How do we keep this going towards, the future? And you can't mire in that negativity. I think that's one of the things that the staff that we work with, as part of the team is so engrossed in it, right? They're in that every single day. And if you come into that, this oven situation, you just got to be like, okay, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it. you gotta like steer it away from that moment and get it back on track as quickly as possible.
I love it. I love it because what you're describing, and Josh and I know that's why we were smiling for those that are watching this, because you're describing this concept that we talk about a lot called neutral thinking, right? Where it's really just about the facts, like certainly the permission to recognize the negative micro crisis that exists, but to quickly kind of understand, okay, what are the facts? Like maybe why did this happen? Okay, what's our next right step, right?
Yeah,
and it's okay to acknowledge that there's a negative scenario, but without grading, without judgment, and then putting together a solution or one or two solutions or a couple options, and then just going to do the work, right? And talk about this a lot in sports. I mean, I was talking to my 13-year-old daughter last night, who's a field hockey player, and one of the things that she's really working on is something that probably also happens not only in field hockey but in soccer, for example, like this idea of pre-scanning. In other words, when you're off ball, when you don't have the ball, like you're still incredibly active, right? You're trying to figure out, okay, where are the defenders on my right side, on my left side, on behind me? Where's my next pass going to be? And you have to do that really fast, right? And that didn't always happen the way that you're picturing it, but visualizing that scenario so that way you can play fast, you can move fast, you can make the right decisions, you can have a bias for action.
I love that.
You feel confident about that. And so
sounds like the front of the house, Ryan, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about this, what's kind of always having a plan B is like this, this concept of pre-scanning in sports. Right? It's just kind of understanding like what is on the horizon that I can, that will allow me to be a little more nimble, allow my psychological flexibility to be a little bit more firm, because this is not something that came out of the blue. I'm not shocked by this scenario because I've already kind of played this in my head, and so I love that. I think that's a tool that whether you're in leadership or whether you're an individual contributor, having that as a daily kind of plan. And that's something you have to really work on. That's a muscle that you really have to strengthen, because when you're not doing it, that muscle will atrophy. You know what I mean? Like that would be something that you're not quite as sharp in those moments if you're not practicing that, even in the smallest kind of, even in scenarios that are less, that have, less, that the stakes aren't as high. Those are great opportunities to practice that stuff, because when the stakes are higher, it's already a muscle that you've been working on. Right. Like that's helpful. Yeah,
it is. And I think that goes into your visualization, practices that you certainly do it in sports. We do it on the cook line when we're, visualizing, how we want to have a new dish, as simple as that, or how we're going to execute, service tonight. You have to visualize that in a way that prepares your mind for when those go times happen, and you need that calm in the middle of a storm.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Okay, last couple questions here. First one is, okay, young chef coming up. What is one piece of advice you would give maybe to your, maybe to your 25-year-old self, or just a new chef coming into the world and starting their own restaurant? What's one piece of advice you would give them?
Is this the Nutri-Nugget of the day?
I don't know. Maybe it's no. But if you were going to have a neutral nugget, what sauce would you have? We should have asked that.
Yeah, exactly. Right. What sauce would you have on it? Lever advice. I think the sky's the limit. Don't stop dreaming. I think is such an important thing. I figured out long ago that as I started in this business, I took a shot at it. I really loved it. I loved the kind of the militaristic hierarchy of it. My dad was in the military. I found a lot of kind of value and satisfaction and comfort in that. I think finding that beginning point, of course, but don't define your end point. This career and any career is going to take you on a meandering path. And what does that look like? You might start off as an athlete and end up doing this amazing podcast on the value of the mind and the power of it. You might start as a chef and you might end up designing private kitchens for residences, or doing food on JetBlue Airlines. I think those things are out there, and I think not defining it too closely, and then don't be afraid of change. I think understand that you will hit things that are unimaginable along the path. And, COVID was something that is an incredibly emotional time when I think about it. Every March 15th and 20th that come up is really difficult for me now because I remember the just incredible roller coaster that we went through at a time where we were really growing our company, and just kind of watching it all come tumbling down and then have to be rebuilt again. is something that we live through in our generation. Other generations have lived through their version of that. Just be okay. Change is going to happen. It's going to be big change, and you just got to stay nimble along the way.
Change is inevitable. Growth is optional.
Yeah, I love that.
That's it. Well, awesome, Ryan. Harry, any last thoughts or any last questions for Ryan before we get out of here?
No, I mean, I think that the parallels to me to the kitchen, to a restaurant, to a restaurateur, to a leader in that space are so freaking similar to, whether it be kind of your a typical kind of corporate environment, certainly, in athletics. And, Josh, you were mentioning, you kind of were, tongue in cheek saying that, hey, every day is like Super Bowl, right? Mm-hmm. Well, it may or may not be the Super Bowl, but it certainly is it reminds me of like a long Major League Baseball season, where you pretty much play every day, right? Yeah. Every day is game day. And that's, if you're looking, depending on your perspective, that can be very overwhelming. But I think that when I think you also, the perspective could shift to where that means that every day is kind of a clean slate, like yesterday might've been absolute dog shit. Right.
Yeah.
But we talk a lot about the past does not predict the future, and the past could be yesterday, right? The past doesn't have to be some like long history and long journey. Like the path could have just been yesterday, could have been the last 5 minutes. It does not predict the future. It does not predict the next 5 minutes. It doesn't predict tomorrow. And so the opportunity, I think, if I'm in that space, is like every day is a new opportunity to kind of impact these diners, impact these customers, impact these people that are on the team. So I think that's like a really neat, really cool environment to be a part of,
I love that.
And I think it's pretty cool that you've been able to build, different successful businesses. Not everything thrives, right? Not everything survives, but as an entrepreneur, as a restaurateur, like that's part of why you're doing this work. You know what I mean? Yeah. Because in many ways, it's an art. This is you're like an artist, like somebody who's, just you're like a performer in music or a musician or whatever. Like, this is something that is not going to be for everybody, right? And that's okay, Right. And so I just think that the space that you're in, I've always been really curious about it, and so this gives me a little insight, I think, into what it takes to be great. So I think it's really special. I'm grateful for you being here.
That's awesome. Thank you. It looks like I need to open a Pasquale Jones in Louisville sometime soon. So
no doubt, man. Come back to Kentucky, man. Yeah, come back to your roots.
Hey,
exactly.
Kentucky. Yeah, I love it. Anything you want to promote? Anything you're working on right now? I know obviously Charlie Bird down there on Houston, and what's the cross street? Houston and
6th Avenue.
6th Avenue, and then Pasquale Jones right there on Mulberry Street. But anything else you want to promote?
Yeah. Look, I think this time of the year is an awesome time to go visit your local restaurants. I think the weather is beautiful in New York City. It's 75 degrees and sunny today. Get out there. I think we've seen such a transition in the industry. People working from home, obviously, coming into the city Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays. Be a part of the community in which you want, and I think that's a huge thing. We're always doing, obviously, these fun dinners, pizza omakase or pasta lab is at Charlie Bird. It's a great time and a lot of fun. Get out there, go out and eat at your local spots.
And they can sign up for your newsletter where, Ryan? Because I know I get the newsletter still, which I'm so excited about. I stay up on the news, but where can they sign up for that?
You can go to delicioushosPitality.group.com if you'd like, or you can go to either one of the restaurants, charliebirdnyc.com or pasqualejones.com.
Beautiful, and you'll get lots of great information. And
Josh, awesome. looks like next time we're in the city, Josh, we got some.
Come on, man.
Yeah, we're gonna have to do it, bro. No doubt.
We'll talk baseball.
Yeah. I'll have to send my brother Russell and his wife Sierra down to one of these restaurants. I'll give you a heads up. I'll make an introduction to you too.
That'd be great.
They've been staying in Brooklyn, but now they have a placing up in Greenwich now. But they're down in the city quite a bit, so
that's great.
We get them down there. Yeah,
please. I would love to meet them. All right.
Thanks so much, Ryan.
Guys,
just appreciate you. And as we always say here at Limitless Minds, you don't have to be sick to get better.
I'll see you guys.
Let's go.